I am the Knight. I am vengeance. I just watched The Batman and it was good. Screw the title of this video, I liked it. We'll talk about the problems with it later, but generally my feedback is positive. I was gonna make this grand intro about how The Batman was one of the best superhero movies in a while and that DC is really upping its game. But fuck it, I'm not giving into that. It was just a good movie. It's just a cool detective film about a smart guy that high-key has a thing for winged mammals. Which is dope, in addition to a bunch of other good things. So let's talk about them. But before that, I just want to let you know that there will be spoilers in this video, and you probably won't understand what I'm saying if you haven't seen the movie. Also, a little bit of housekeeping. Hi, my name's Ariana Alexis, and if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you know that I've been away for a bit. Much like Bruce Wayne, I don't look like I do much, but I got a lot of stuff going on in the background, and most of my work happens at night. So if you care about what's been happening with moi, stick to the end of the video and I'll update you guys on what cool projects I've been doing, like another In Defensive video, and a possible movie. That's pretty cool. Also, I've been known to wear theme shirts, and today is no exception. I just wanted to make a note of that. But now we talk about The Batman. First off, I think it's very worth mentioning that I could see everything. Movies are a visual medium, so this should be a given, but it's not. Way too often I've been subjected to movies so dark they're basically just badly narrated podcasts. That wasn't the case for The Batman. It's a dark film, but there were levels to the dark. There was a lot of blue and oranges and different shades of black that actually made it kind of inviting and cozy in an ominous and threatening sort of way. This shouldn't be a big thing, but it had a visual clarity that many brighter films lack. Spider-Man No Way Home. What I'm saying is, it was pretty, and I really enjoyed being able to actually follow what was happening on screen. So it gets points right off the bat. Second thing on the docket, the Riddler. The Riddler was the most terrifying portrayal of a Batman villain I've ever seen. I know we have Heath Ledger's Joker. I had a crush on the Joker in high school, I'm very aware of him. But Riddler was even more scary, sans face paint. He felt more real. He wasn't an anarchist maniac who burned piles of mob money and blew up an evacuated hospital. The Riddler is a legit serial killer, mannerisms and all. What's so scary about the Riddler is that he was just a regular dude with an accounting job that systematically selected and tortured people in his spare time. People like that exist in our real world. All of this is not a hot take since Matt Reeves said that Mindhunter and Zodiac were inspirations for the film, but I think it's worth noting. And what's even more spine-chilling is that the boss fight at the end of the movie wasn't even against the real Riddler. It was a bunch of other regular dudes that naturally gravitated toward his message and were willing to take over for him to become terrorists and overthrow their government. It's a dystopian reality that does not feel far enough away from ours. And Paul Dano was absolutely perfect for the role. He wasn't as good as Heath Ledger, but he was good. In all of the movies I've seen him in, i.e. Little Miss Sunshine and Ruby Sparks, he plays this slightly unnerving, pseudo-intellectual, disenfranchised guy. He's on the brink of likability, but not enough to carry the role. The Riddler is a version of that character, but it worked here. You can tell he tapped into a deep well of infamous serial killers. He captured the terror and strange sense of pitiful emptiness a lot of them seem to have. You can feel his pain, and it kind of makes you unwillingly sympathize with him, which is captivating and adds another level of terror. The one thing that bothered me about the Riddler was that throughout most of the film, I was confused as to why so many of his riddles were so easy. Like, I wasn't distractingly confused, but it made me cock my head. For example, the first question he posed was, what does a liar do when he's dead? I got the answer before the people on screen. I'm bragging a little bit, but I should not be able to solve the riddles before Batman. I get Riddler mainly showed up in the 60s TV show and his thing was pun riddles. But come on, he just cut off someone's finger and then used the blood to write on a wall. Like, again, he's a scary, realistic serial killer. It doesn't seem appropriate for him to be using this weird, clown-like humor. But the Riddler's end monologue brilliantly recontextualized the entire movie. Riddler was pairing these riddles with his kills, not to confuse Batman, but to help him take down Gotham crime rings. Of course the riddles were easy. Riddler thought they were working together. He wasn't trying to mess with him, he wanted Batman to solve the mysteries to get to the next piece of helpful information. What originally felt like a tacky homage to a bad show paid off in a surprisingly meaningful way that enhanced the narrative and the characters and made for a fucking amazing mind-warping twist. Since the main villain of the movie was basically a weak nerd, there were very few fight scenes that meant anything. Sure, there were fights, but there was this consistent lack of physical threat because Batman's covered in Kevlar and swats attackers away like bees. He was unbeatable, and I loved it. Why did I love it? A, I hate fight scenes. And B, that meant they had to raise the stakes in different ways. And the way Reeves chose to do that was through making Batman's journey to becoming Batman part of the stumbling blocks. This film takes place in Batman's second year, so while watching him solve mysteries in what is essentially a detective movie, we get to see him discover how to be the Batman we're used to. Much of the film's tension comes from him overcoming things he's never dealt with before. There's a moment when Batman runs from a stairwell onto the top of a building where he proceeds to screech to a halt and gasp in fear while almost running off the roof to his death. Any other Batman wouldn't have batted an eye at this, but this is this guy's first time. We take for granted that it takes a lot of getting used to fearlessly strap on a glider and jump off a building. In this movie, we get to see Batman progress from unproductively bashing through problems to understanding the value of covertness and using his influence as Bruce Wayne as an asset to his vigilante work. In fact, for most of the film, being Bruce Wayne barely factors into his life at all. A fact that is a welcome relief considering this is the first live-action Batman movie that actually seems interested in Batman as a character instead of just Bruce. And I'm including the Nolan trilogy. Sure, Nolan had the Batsuit, but it felt more as if he was into exploring the villains and how Batman affected the life of Bruce Wayne rather than how Bruce Wayne affected being Batman. The thing is, Bruce doesn't think of himself as Bruce. He thinks of himself as Batman, with Bruce being an obligation. It's an extremely interesting concept, yet no other movie has even tried to analyze the psychology of someone that would think of themselves in this way. Previous filmmakers treat him as a normal guy that dresses up like a bat to solve crimes, but you know, that isn't weird. But you know what? It is weird. It's fucking weird. And Reeves leans into that. Batman is the only one, and I mean the only one, that wears a themed costume in the 2022 movie. Even Riddler, the kitschy serial killer, wears a military mask he bought from a store in his normal-ass clothes. Batman is absolutely crazy. He calls himself a nocturnal creature of the night. If anyone unironically said that to you, you would run away, not root for them. That's why it was so valuable listening to Batman push away and reject his other life. It gave us a peek into a psychology we've taken for granted as normal, but is profoundly broken. Unrelated, but also related, this movie is hysterical despite having no jokes. They don't use one-liners or overly silly characters, but there's a lot of unexpected jokes that come from characterization and subtle shot choices. It was refreshing to see non-distracting comedy that enhanced the emotion and tone of the film. It struck a great balance within the film language Reeves established. Now that we talked about most of the good things in this movie, let's talk about some of the bad. The thing that you presumably came here for. Starting with Rob Bat. You know who I'm talking about. He was a great Batman. And by Batman, I mean Batman. He was great in the suit, he was threatening, the brooding was on point, his inner monologue captured the appropriate amount of pain and intensity, and I could hear every word he said. Christian Bale. But Pattinson was a bad Bruce Wayne. I guess it makes sense because Batman is technically also a bad Bruce Wayne until he learns to not be in this movie, but it just felt very emo. Like, Rob Bat took it a little bit too far. Again, it may have been the point, but it was still a slog to watch. Second, the cat-bat love story. I don't buy it. There was more chemistry between the Riddler and Batman than them. It felt like Zoe Kravitz tried to make the relationship look organic, but Robert wasn't giving in. It would have been fine if Zoe played it like she was teasingly trying to shoot her shot to see if she can get him to crack, him not responding, and her acknowledging the lack of response. That way it would be like the cat's hunting the bat, but he's way too into his own head to acknowledge it. But they were both saying and doing things, especially in the final scene together, that made it seem like they were both feeling a meaningful and reciprocal connection that nobody else could see. It would have been better and shorter if they just took out the romantic subplot. This stunned cat-bat relationship mimics the Batman-Alfred relationship. Andy Serkis is great, but he was the worst Alfred I've ever seen. It felt like Batman hated Alfred, Alfred hated Batman, and neither of them wanted to be around each other, but they stayed for the children. But guess what? There were no children. This strained father-son thing would work if they were even remotely loving towards each other in between being petty, but they weren't. It was apathy at best. The whole time, Bruce was a dick to Alfred and Alfred was pissy back. So when they finally had a heartfelt moment after Alfred almost died, I didn't care because it wasn't earned. It felt like just the next step in becoming a fully fledged Batman, so they went there. On a more personal gripe, as much as the main villain was the Riddler, it wasn't. The crux of everything, even the Riddler murders, was mob activity and corruption, and honestly, I'm tired of it. The Riddler had a fantastic justification for why he did what he did, feeling as though he and all the other disenfranchised people were left to fall through the cracks so the rich in the city could get richer. But did it have to be mobsters doing it? I get Batman being a normal man dealing with the fallout of government corruption has a lot of kingpins he deals with, but kingpins are not inherently interesting. They're macho Italian man with mustaches and a power complex. And as a half Italian woman, I've seen enough. They're overplayed and are almost never used to explore themes beyond status corrupts. And by the way, I know the argument for why they use mobsters in this movie and why Batman fights so many. I get it, but I'm allowed to be annoyed. As stated, it's my personal gripe. And those are my thoughts on the Batman. It had some flaws, but overall I liked it. It wasn't as good as the Suicide Squad, but we can't all be. Thank you to all of you who stayed around to listen to me talk. This isn't my normal camera, but I figured the webcam would make it more personal, so here we are. I first want to say thank you to everyone who subscribed for helping me hit 25,000 subscribers. It's infinitely exciting, and I am so grateful to all of you. You have no idea how much this means to me. I love you all, not personally, but in a more collective sense. So where have I been? Number one, I've been in the process of making a video essay about In Defense of Jerry from Rick and Morty, so that's gonna come down the pipeline in about a month or so. But the reason why I've taken so long to make the Jerry video is because I've been working on something else, which I argue has been even more cool. And that is, I am producing and directing my own independent documentary. Yay! It's amazing, but oh my gosh, is that a lot of work. So here's my pitch. Back in the 60s and 70s, there were these things called underground newspapers. And underground newspapers were basically these vehicles for young, new left alternative groups to get their voices out there and to affect change in the areas that they lived. And my film explores one of those papers that were local to me in Toronto, and the paper was called The Guerrilla. So it's gonna look at how the guerrilla contributed to the broader culture and to the Toronto community in the 70s. The reason I know about the guerrilla, despite it seeming like it's been lost to time, is because my grandfather, George the Bear Longley, who was this really big union teamster back in the day, wrote for it, and he died back in the 80s, so his writings in the paper are basically the only way we now know him. So in this movie, I'm hoping to capture the legacy of my grandfather, and the newspaper while also showing the importance of being a part of something bigger than yourself. At least that's what we're going for right now. Things are happening. It's been an absolute whirlwind. I've met a lot of different people, and the research process is absolutely insane. What's so crazy about this is that I'm doing research almost every single day, but since it's not contributing to a larger YouTube video, it feels like research isn't happening, but it is. Usually I have like a metric that this video is gone at this day, this video is gone at this day, but for this it's like an hour and a half long movie that I'm trying to make. I'm pumped to get the movie going and for you guys to see it. And if I don't make videos as frequently as I used to, this is why. But I'm still gonna be making videos. If you want to support this channel, like this video, and subscribe to my channel. I like it. I like my channel. You might too. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.